Uh, Good morning. Welcome to the April 27th Executive Committee meeting. I'm Councillor Ann Stevenson. I'll be chairing in the Mayor's Place for the start of the meeting at least. So welcome everyone. I always seem to have very hectic mornings the days that I chair, but again, it's always a wonderful moment to pause and reflect and acknowledge that we are here today on Treaty 6 territory and recognize the diverse Indigenous peoples whose ancestors' footsteps have marked this territory for centuries, including the Cree, Dene, Saulteaux, Blackfoot, Nakota Sioux, as well as Métis and Inuit, and now settlers from around the world. We are joined in chambers this morning by my colleague, Councillor Rutherford, an Executive Committee member.
Good morning.
The other committee members for Executive are Councillor Knack,
Good morning.
Councillor Rice. Councillor Rice, are you with us online?
She did let us know that she may be absent this morning.
Oh, okay, great. Well, we are at a thin precipice of quorum, but we can move forward. I'd also like to acknowledge my other colleagues who have joined us this morning, Councillor Salvador, Councillor Wright, Councillor Principe, Councillor Tang.
Good morning.
Good morning. And Councillor Tang are here with us today. And if I've missed anyone, please let me know. Our first order of business is to adopt the agenda. Councillor Rutherford, can I leave that to you?
Sure can. I move that the April 27th, 2022 Executive Committee meeting agenda be adopted with the following change. Replacement Attachment 6.4, Approval of Land Purchase, Heritage Valley Attachment 1. Private pursuant Sections 21, 24, and 25 of the Freedom of Information and Protection of Privacy Act.
Thank you. Let's vote.
Just look, we have all of the votes.
Please display the votes. And that's carried. Now on to the approval of the minutes. Councillor Knack.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I will move the adoption of the minutes from the April 8th, 2022 Executive Committee non-regular and the April 13th, 2022 Executive Committee meeting.
Thank you. Please vote.
We have 3 votes.
Please display the vote. And that's carried. Now, I'm not aware of any protocol items this morning, so we'll move straight into selecting items for debate. Councillor Rutherford.
Yeah, I would just like to select 6.3, please.
Thank you. Councillor Knack, any selections for you?
Certain, just on behalf of Councillor Tang has some questions on 6.1, so I'll select that one.
Excellent. I don't see anyone else on the board. If any other colleagues not on the committee wanted to put anything in the chat, but I think that we'll be fine there. So we have selected 6.1 and 6.3. And so now we will vote on the remaining items. Councillor Knack, did you want to move those remaining
Sure.
items?
I'll move the remaining items.
Excellent. Please vote.
We have 3 votes.
Please display the vote. And that's carried. Do we need to do a quick review of what we've dealt with today?
Yes, please. Thank you, Madam Chair. This morning, Executive Committee has passed the recommendations of the following reports without debate. Item 5.1, the Child Friendly Advisory Committee bylaw with a revised due date to be determined. Item 6.2, bylaw 20038, to designate the Canada Permanent Building as a municipal historic resource. 6.4, approval of land purchase, Heritage Valley. And 6.5, taxes recommended for cancellation exempt properties.
Excellent. So next we're going to hear the names of those who have made a request to speak. So I'll move that Executive Committee hear from the following speakers in panels where appropriate. On item 6.3, I have Harpreet Singh. Are you with us in person or online? Okay,
I believe they are online this morning.
Okay, we are moving incredibly quickly through this agenda, so I do see you there, Mr. Singh. If you're able to let us know that you're there, I'll come back to you in a moment. We also have Daryl Niedermeyer, I believe also online. Are you with us this morning?
Yes, I'm on Google Meet.
Wonderful. Thank you for being here with us. And Christy Wendell.
Yes, also on Google Meet.
Great. Thank you very much. I will try again for Mr. Singh when we're on that item, but for now we will move to our first item of business, first report 6.1.
Apologies, we need to vote on the request to speak.
Oh, we need to vote on the request. Of course we do. Let us vote.
We have 3 votes.
Please display the votes. Wonderful, and that's carried. Okay, so turning to item 6.1, is there a presentation from administration?
We do have a presentation. Good morning, Executive Committee. The Investment Committee Annual Report provides a summary of the results of the city's various investment funds for 2021. It outlines key projects that were completed as well as provides an overview of the work plan for 2022. Next slide, please. The city's investment program invests monetary assets of the city and trust assets under the administration of the city. The assets are comprised of the assets of the Edtel Endowment Fund, the city's pension fund, long-term disability fund, reserves, and working capital. While the majority of these underlying assets are held for a specific purpose, the city's investment program helps diversify the revenue base and supports Edmonton's financial sustainability. The earnings of the city's investment funds are used to fund capital on a pay-as-you-go basis. This allows the city to manage the risk associated with the volatility in earnings while allowing these earnings to be contributed back to support various capital projects. Over the past 10 years, these earnings have been the equivalent to the city increasing property taxes by 6%, or $83 million a year. The Edtel Endowment Fund is the city's largest investment fund. Since its inception in 1995, a total of $915 million in dividends has been paid back to the city. This is in addition to the growth of the fund's principal from $465 million to $998 million. Over the last 10 years, $478 million of earnings from the city's other funds have been contributed back to the city's budget. I'll now hand the presentation over to Sandy McPherson, whose team manages the city investments.
Great, thanks, Stacy. You're on the slide. Good. The investments are governed by the MGA and its investment regulations. City Council approves the investment policy. The Investment Committee Terms of Reference, which is approved by the City Manager, outlines the roles and responsibilities of the various entities involved in managing the city's financial assets. The Investment Committee is comprised of 2 internal and 5 external members who are appointed to bring both investment and business expertise to the city's funds. The city's investment management team manages the investment portfolio. Certain aspects of the portfolio are managed in-house, while others are managed through external investment managers. Each investment manager has an agreement and mandate that covers their investment guidelines of what they can do. The investment policy requires an annual report back to Council, hence why we're here today, measuring performance against the policy's various objectives. Next slide. Overall, the city manages $3.4 billion in a variety of different funds. The funds are comprised of both city assets as well as third-party assets such as the pension and long-term disability funds. The largest fund is the EdTel Endowment Fund at $998 million as at the end of last year, and the smallest is the Long-Term Disability Fund at $175 million. Next slide, please. Of this $3.4 billion, $1.5 billion of the city's investment structure is managed by external managers in multiple asset classes. The assets of the EdTel Endowment, Pension, Balance, and LTD funds are pooled together to achieve economies of scale and therefore reduce fees. Asset classes and asset mix is determined by assessing investment objectives, risk tolerance, and time horizon. The various underlying fund managers utilize different investment strategies depending on the mandate. In addition, $1.9 billion is managed internally by the city's investment staff. These assets are invested in money market and fixed income securities. The fee savings from managing a portion of the city's financial assets in-house are estimated to be approximately $1.5 million per year. Next slide, please. In terms of 2021 investment highlights, investment returns in 2021 ranged from minus 0.8% for the short-term bond fund to 15% for the pension fund, depending on each fund's asset mix. So in other words, the mix of assets between fixed income and, let's say, equities. On a 4-year basis, returns have remained strong, and over a longer-term 10-year basis, investment returns have been even better, with all of the funds outperforming their benchmarks. The city's largest fund, the EdTel Endowment Fund, paid $41 million in dividends to the city in 2021 and ended the year at its highest market value since inception. Next slide, please. With respect to key projects that were completed in 2021, City Council previously approved a revised investment policy to include a new real estate asset class to diversify the investment funds further. Transition of assets to the new structure began in 2021 and is expected to be largely complete by the end of this year. The City's Investment Committee terms of reference was also updated in 2021 to reflect the new investment policy approved by City Council. This included an update to the risk management section to align with that of the policy. Finally, the Treasury system for investments was upgraded to enable straight-through processing and electronic settlement of money market investment transactions, improving efficiency and timeliness. Next slide, please. In terms of environmental, social, and governance considerations with respect to the city's investments, all of the city's investment managers incorporate ESG factors into their investment decision-making when selecting companies to invest in on behalf of the City of Edmonton. In addition, all of the managers are signatories of the United Nations Principles of Responsible Investment, which provide an industry-wide standard against which the manager can continue to assess itself, strive for best-in-class due diligence, investment monitoring, and reporting. Furthermore, the city's investment policy contains a commitment for the City of Edmonton to support social and ethical business practices by voting on corporate policies of the companies in which the city owns shares. In 2021, the City of Edmonton continued to exercise its shareholder rights and vote its proxies in accordance with the investment policy. Next slide, please. We thank you for your time today. This concludes our presentation. We're more than happy to answer any questions council may have.
Would you like to share? Sure. Thank you very much for that. We'll go now to questions. I'll just wait for the board to populate. Councillor Tang.
Okay, well, great. Thank you so much for that presentation. I thought this was a really well done report. I think, I guess I want to start with the EdTel Endowment Fund. how does that special dividend work? Because I see in the report that, we are slated for a special dividend on top of the regular dividend for 2022 because of a stronger performance than would be expected. But how come we didn't have one for 2021, given that it was the strongest year since inception? So what triggers that?
So the special dividend for the EdTel Endowment Fund is determined by formula. So essentially, the way the fund works is it grows the principal of the fund at a rate that matches inflation in order to maintain its purchasing power. Once the fund reaches greater than 15%, once the fund is more than 15% greater than the inflation adjusted principal, it triggers a dividend to bring it back into that corridor. So we had a dividend not last year, but the year before. And as the funds perform well, the money returns in the form of a special dividend. If the funds were to perform poorly, the regular dividend would also be influenced and lower if it drops below a certain threshold.
Yeah, gotcha. And so this dividend just goes back into the city coffer. City may use it to offset property tax and fund capital and that kinds of, or is there designated use?
So the special dividend, council is free to do what they want with the special dividend. It is considered one-time money, so the special dividend can't be used to offset the tax levy. The regular dividend is ongoing money, though, and is used to fund capital on a pay-as-you-go basis.
Gotcha. I think it's great that we had a really strong year. I'm just wondering, how can we ensure that we are continuously increasing our performance? So generally it looks great, but for example, it's negative 0.8% on the bond side.
I'll maybe ask Mr. McPherson to answer that question.
Sure, no problem. So, Councillor Tang, are you talking about the short-term bond fund or just all of our funds?
The short-term bond.
Okay, yeah. So obviously, given the fact that interest rates rose throughout 2021, that had a negative effect in terms of the overall return for the short-term bond fund. I would mention, though, that we don't typically look on a year-per-year basis in terms of how we're measuring our performance. We typically think about more of a 4-year, longer-term type of time horizon. And on that merit, for example, when we created the short-term bond fund, which goes back to 2004, if you can believe it, the difference between that fund, the earnings on that fund versus had the money just been sitting in cash in our money market fund has translated into approximately $60 million of extra earnings back to the city's budget.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, okay. No, that's helpful to think about the time horizon. I want to just mention, I think last year, City of Vancouver issued a $100 million sustainability bond. Is that something like we have the capacity to do? Something like that feels very aligned with the ESG that you had presented earlier on. How would that work in terms of issuing bonds?
So issuing bonds, so in terms of the investment report and the investment strategy, when we talk about bonds in this context, we're talking about the bonds that we purchase as investments. When you talk about us issuing bonds, that would be on the debt side. So typically we have borrowed through Alberta Treasury Board and Finance, and previously Alberta Capital Financing Authority, at rates that have been more favorable to us than issuing our own bonds. But when you see cities doing that's what they're doing. They're issuing their own debt in their own name.
Right, and I guess I was curious, does the MGA allow us to do that? Because I know the options to generate, alternative revenues is quite limited, as laid out in the legislation.
Yes, it's Ingrid Johnson from Legal Services. We can issue bonds. It's just there is a cost to doing it, and it right now, compared to what we pay in interest from our current lender, it's not just feasible at this moment.
Gotcha. I have one more follow-up question. I'll come back for a second round. Thank you.
And if I may just correct something I said earlier, we did receive a special dividend in 2021, and that was used to fund the COVID funding strategy for 2022.
Yeah, good.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Tang. Thank you, Councillor Stevenson, for chairing the meeting and starting the meeting. And I'll go to you next for questions.
Thanks very much. So yeah, excellent report, well written, and also some really great news in terms of the performance. So well done there. Following on that question of the special dividend for 2022, when will we have an opportunity to discuss what we may do with that 11 million?
So there's still a little bit of time here before we actually know whether a special dividend is appropriate this year. And that determination is at the end of June. So at the end of June, if the fund itself is valued greater than the inflation adjusted principal, we would make that determination and we would come back to council, typically as part of the capital and operating financial updates, and make a recommendation for how that fund should be used. We've traditionally put it to capital, we've used it for COVID, but if there are other items that council would like to fund on a one-time basis, that's when that decision would occur.
Perfect, thank you. I just want to dig in a bit further to the ESG factors. And, I heard throughout the report that it is something that we take into consideration in the investment decisions. But I'm just wondering how explicit or how strong that policy is. So, for example, I know RBC offers some funds that, prohibit investment in arms, for example. There are some that are fossil fuel free. Just wondering how intentional we're being in our ESG policies.
Thanks, Councillor. So we've taken a proactive approach rather than, if you want to call it, a negative screening or divestment approach, which you were referring to. So it takes a multifaceted, proactive approach where not only do our managers incorporate ESG into the decisions that they make on behalf of investing for the City of Edmonton, we also vote all of our proxies according to those same social and ethical guidelines, which are contained in our broader investment policy. We also engage with our investment managers on a regular basis in terms of things that they're doing from an initiative standpoint to try to even push the envelope further, if you will. They also engage with companies directly on the city's behalf to try to, again, influence and encourage the desired behavior. And what I might say also is almost a number of them, close to half of all of our managers actually they're all signatories of the UN Principles for Responsible Investment, but over and above that, they are signatories of a new asset manager initiative whereby they're committing by 2050, although there's large reductions before then, to be not only net zero in their own operations, but also the portfolios that they manage on behalf of the city. So we're taking it from a number of different angles rather than being, I guess if you want to call it, divesting and then allowing others to try to encourage that behavior.
Sure. No, I appreciate that. And maybe it's just a matter of language. So when I hear that they take ESG into consideration in the decision making, does that mean that if there are ESG concerns that the investment doesn't proceed, or it's just one factor, and let's say if the returns were really lucrative, that might outweigh the ESG considerations? I think that's just what I'm a bit unclear about.
So each of our investment managers makes decisions with a different investment philosophy. So they would all make different decisions. They all follow these policies and procedures. But I think it was best described to us in a recent meeting that we had that they generally try to make investments in companies that are pushing the environmental, social governance in the right direction, and the power of institutional investors to impact that change through the investment universe.
I'll probably have to come back for a second round, sorry, but maybe just as an example, because I think that's really exciting that we are using our voting privileges. So is there maybe an example of a case that we used our vote to shift a policy in a company, just to have a flavor of what that might look like?
Sure, yeah. Do you want me to respond to that? Yeah. So we're not as large. Stacy was just mentioning, we met with our international equity manager. Their name is Fidelity Investments. It's public knowledge. They have trillions of dollars that they're investing on behalf of institutional investors such as ourselves. They have a lot more ability in terms of voting their shares. We are, I would say, sort of aligned with that, but we're not necessarily driving a lot of these proposals, but we are most certainly voting in accordance with trying to influence the change that you're referring to, Councillor.
We'll come back. Good. Thank you so much. I just want to follow up on first of all, thank you so much for all the good work that all the folks in the investment portfolios are doing, and it's a very good report, and the way these investments are performing absolutely give us that stable funding to run our programs and do some capital projects. Well, what I want to understand is the not shifting, but actually leveraging what we have, whether it's special dividends or money when it's more funds are outperforming, for some of the economic growth opportunities, and leveraging that with some of the funding that is becoming available from the federal government, from the provincial government, to spur that inclusive economic growth. Just want to get a sense from that. Have we thought about kind of leveraging what we have, the assets that we have, in spurring that economic growth?
So in terms of the assets that we have and we manage in this portfolio, these are assets that are set aside for specified purposes. And so we very much manage them with a viewpoint of that associates the risk with the underlying asset that they're held for. But if you're talking about could we use something like the EdTel special dividend to create an investment opportunity in a city in something else, that is something that in the past we've looked at multiple times, but that is something that you could use EdTel Endowment Fund to create something that then you use to either promote economic development or invest in different organizations within the city. Usually, though, we would recommend doing that by grant, but you could create a fund from a grant program that is sourced with the money from the EdTel
So
Endowment Fund.
not touching the capital, absolutely, what we have, and not touching the dividends that we get. It is about the uplift that we get once in a while, and the special dividends, and when the funds outperform. Because I think the sense, like when we engage, what I'm seeing through budget, provincial and federal, there's a number of funds being created. I just want to make sure we are not losing the opportunity to leverage some of those funds and also spur some of the private sector potential. So that's where I'm going with this, right? Whether we do through dividends or whatever that might be. I just want to get a sense on that. Yeah.
Yeah, so I would say you could use the special dividend for something like that. I would say we put all of the investment earnings, the regular investment earnings, to the capital budget. You could always make decisions about how much of your investment earnings go to fund capital versus go to different initiatives. But that would be a discussion that you had maybe in the context of the operating budget, because you'd want to, any decisions to take dividends and place them elsewhere would obviously impact capital. And we've always put the outperformance, so to the extent that they perform better, that typically goes to the capital program, except you make individual decisions on the special one-time dividend.
Yeah. Because we could align that with some of the other city objectives, like on climate change, on, because there are economic growth potentials in taking action on climate change. That, if we do have something called, say, Opportunities Fund, I think Calgary has leveraged some of that Other cities are doing that. I'm just using that as an example. I think those are kind of opportunities that I'm thinking about. Not touching the capital, not looking at what we already get, but more of just thinking aloud on those things. Yeah. Okay. Let me think more about it. Maybe we'll see if there's maybe we can generate a report. I know you have done that work in the past, like what those opportunities could look like. Okay. Let me think about that. Councillor Tang?
Oh, I don't know if
Councillor
maybe
Steven.
executive committee member.
Yeah,
goes
sorry,
first.
Councillor Stevenson, go ahead.
Thank you. Just following up on a few others. The real estate portfolio, is that sort of investing in rental properties, for example, in infrastructure, I understood as well? Just being mindful of how real estate speculation can drive up housing costs in cities across the world. So just wondering, is that land speculation type real estate investment, or is that more the long-term rental income approach?
Sure, Councillor. So that's a global real estate strategy where we've hired a manager that will go out and put together a portfolio on the city's behalf, which is consistent with our return and risk objectives. I would say it's core. If that tag resonates to you, it's definitely not speculative. It's not retail. It's institutional. It's around the world, and we're talking about, again, really good diversification, not only from a industrial standpoint, multi-purpose standpoint, different sectors and regions and countries. So definitely
Great.
not a retail oriented strategy, if that makes sense to you.
Perfect. Yep. Thank you so much. And sorry, I always forget we're just down to 3 minutes now. Do we manage investments on behalf of Edmonton Public Library or Edmonton Police Service at all? Do we manage their reserves, investments for them?
So to the extent that their reserves are included in our financial statements, yes, we do. To my knowledge, the library does not have a separate investment program for themselves, but we manage globally for the corporation as a whole.
Okay, I know I believe EPS has some reserve funds as well, but we don't manage those, or do we?
They form part of the larger city reserves that would ultimately flow up through these funds.
Perfect. Just wondering, the major cities investment regulations that were referenced in terms of those changes happening at the provincial level, is that anything that we need to be doing some advocacy for through Alberta municipalities, or do we anticipate that's a fairly smooth process?
I'll start and then I'll throw it to Sandy, but we don't anticipate that to be an overly onerous piece of work. Both of the major cities do have quite an ability under the regulation to invest in a broad range of investments. So unless Sandy has anything else.
Yeah, I would just add to Stacey's comments that a lot of that heavy lifting that you're referring to happened years ago. And to the last time that it was up for renewal, which is 5 years ago, well, a little bit more than 5 years ago, it really opened things up and recognized the fact that City of Edmonton, City of Calgary, for example, needed different opportunities given the sophistication and the size of assets that we're referring to. So it so far, knock on wood, has been relatively seamless, but again, we have to approach them, and I'm in the midst of talking to our colleagues at City of Medicine Hat, City of Calgary, to if you want to call it, have a united front in terms of when we approach them.
Sure, and if we can ever help at the political level, I think we would be happy to. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Stevenson. Councillor Tang?
Yeah, thank you so much. I guess to Ms. Johnson, just one quick thing of what you said about our ability to issue bond. You mentioned that we are currently at a favorable rate because we borrow from the Treasury, even though that rate actually increased this past year, right? And so despite that, we're still more favorable.
So
That's
actually,
correct. And there's administrative cost in
Right,
addition
that's
to
true.
that.
Yeah.
And it's not just a one-time administrative cost. When you issue bonds, then you have to administer them over the period of time as well. So
Right,
there's an
okay.
additional cost to that.
Okay, fair enough. And then to Ms. Paberry, I'm wondering if with some of the work that has done before, in terms of, maybe circulating some of those income locally to stimulate economic development, would you be able to maybe circulate a memo with council and outline some of the past reports?
Yeah, we would be able to, like, you're looking for us to circulate what considerations have we made in the past with respect to more of the items that the mayor was referring to,
Yeah,
as opposed to the items directly related to how we invest the city's investment funds.
yeah, I think more to Mr. Mayor's question.
Okay, yep, we can circulate a memo on that. That summarizes the work we've done in the past.
Yeah, and I'm also curious, how do we compare to other municipalities in terms of the benchmarks we use for, say, the ETL? How do we compare in terms of our risk and return versus return profile? And when it comes to ETL, something like that, how does it compare in terms of our endowment approach?
So I'll start and I'll get Sandy to maybe speak to the specifics. The one thing I would just draw to your attention that is very few municipalities have an endowment that is similar to the EdTel Endowment Fund. You're more likely to see that type of funding in large educational institutions. We're not aware of any other city that has a large endowment fund.
Yep, that's exactly right. And from a benchmark perspective, those are fairly industry standard measures. So for example, Canadian equity, if you have a manager that's managing Canadian equity on your behalf, you compare it versus the broad Canadian equity index, which is the TSX composite. And from a risk return standpoint, it to a certain extent depends on the asset mix. I would say we're fairly, if you want to call it conservative and traditional, whereby we take a long-term approach and we don't necessarily take undue risk. But you definitely have to try to compare apples to apples if you're trying to compare returns, because it truly depends on the way that the particular endowment is invested.
Gotcha. Okay, well, I'm out of time. I might need one more 3 minutes.
Okay, no problem. I just want to follow up. So I look forward to that memo actually, because I'll hold off because I was thinking of maybe looking at a motion, but I'll hold off because I'll wait for that information to arrive. And because we might have to, when I look at Calgary, I think they created their fund about 2 years ago, and they leveraged, and was created with partnership with province and federal government. Like city put in some money, but they leveraged other orders of government money, and they were able to, I think, attract close to $2 billion of investment in the city. So I think I'll wait for that memo to come, because we might have to engage more with some of the agencies locally here and explore some of the opportunities. So how quickly can that memo arrive? Because my worry is that once that we should not be losing are we ready to take on those opportunities? I just want to know how quickly can you provide that memo?
I think we could provide that memo within the next 2 to 3 weeks, because it's just summarizing the work that we've done internally before. There's no new information in this.
Okay, good, because then if we then after that we can look at making. I'll look at making an inquiry or a motion. We'll see how it goes. Because okay, good. Because I see there's a lot of opportunities out there. We can leverage federal and provincial support to do that. Good. And I'll go to Councillor Tang.
Thank you. Thank you to my colleagues for your patience. And sorry, and just Mr. McPherson, so you mentioning you want to compare apples to apples. So when we look at our portfolio, because it's quite rare among municipalities, more with like university institutions, that's not really a fair comparison to say, well, they can take more risks than municipalities that based on taxpayers' dollars. Is that right?
I'll maybe take this question. So yeah, like when we look across other municipalities, different municipalities will have different investment programs based on the nature of the underlying assets that they're investing in. So Like I said, not all municipalities, or very few municipalities would have an endowment fund. Universities would have an endowment fund. So some of our sister cities might only be managing effectively their reserves. That might be the only excess cash and monetary assets that they're investing. And because they need those reserves in a shorter period of time, their risk profiles will be completely different, which is why we're establishing the benchmarks for each of the individual funds so that we're benchmarking to similar investments with the same risk portfolio.
Gotcha. Right. Okay, thank you. So my last question, I guess a bit broader. When was the last time the city conducted a review of ways to expand revenue options, moving away from the property tax? I think this report just kind of triggered that for me a little bit. I know Calgary did this in the last few years. There's an active resolution with Alberta municipalities, given that there is quite significant provincial advocacy required on this front as well. But I'm wondering if we have any of that.
Sorry, I missed the very first part of your.
Well, just in terms of like our own review of mechanisms to expand revenue options beyond property taxes.
Oh, okay. So yes, like we've done some of that work as part of charter discussions in the past, but I think some of that work will be coming back and are things that we're now reapproaching in the context of that transit strategy report that was here
Right.
a few weeks ago. And so we'll resurrect some of that work that we've done in the past. But most of property taxes, our largest, most significant tool. You have user fees, which are in under your control. Any other powers, though, a lot of them need to be negotiated with the provincial government to give us the power to use tools.
Yeah, and so I'll just follow up on my front on that active resolution. But anyways, kudos to on this work. I do recognize some of the names on the investment committee, given that there are some external members. So I'm very heartened to see their contributions. So thank you all so much for this work.
Thank you, Councillor Tang. So was the recommendation moved or not?
No, I'm happy to
Good.
move that we receive it for information, I believe.
Good. Yeah, thank you so much. All right. Yeah, absolutely. Just give me 1 second. All right, so we have a motion on the, or recommendation on the floor, and to speak, Councillor Rutherford.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to take a few minutes. I definitely won't take all of the time, but I was really impressed by this report. I was really impressed with the way that our finances have been managed, and I think that this is an example. And I know Councillor Knack talks often to, these good news stories that never make it out there, but this to me is one of a great example of how, the city is really positioning itself well. When we hear that number, that stat of 6%, that we've been able to mitigate from tax levy because of the way we're financially managing these investments portfolios, I think it's outstanding. So I just wanted to take a minute to say how impressed I was with this report, how impressed I am with the work and the fiduciary duties that you're all taking on and doing such a great job of. So that was all I wanted to say, and I'm happily willing to accept this report for information and also commit to making sure this information gets out to the public as well, at least in my ward.
Thank you, Councillor Rutherford. Yeah, absolutely. I think we need to celebrate these successes and highlight these successes of the work being done in the corporation. So congratulations to everyone who's been a part of the investment committee and the work being done at the financial and corporate services as well, right? So yeah, we need to figure out a way to really highlight these good news stories, because they don't make the news, but I think that sometimes is the reality, right? So, but absolutely, but we can use our own channels to highlight these good stories. Good. All right, we have a motion on the floor. Please vote.
We have 4 votes.
Display the votes, please. That is carried. So were all the items selected? 6-3. So we next is 6-3. Okay. Okay. All right. 6-3. Is there a
We have speakers.
Yeah, we have speakers, yeah. Yeah. Can we get a presentation, please? There you go. Okay. Okay.
Good morning, members of council. My name is Kent Snyder. I'm the branch manager of Planning and Environment Services. And as well, today I'm acting on behalf of Deputy City Manager Stephanie McCabe. Administration is here to present an information report on purchase options and open space priorities for the Inglewood neighborhood, and specifically the former St. Andrew School field site. With me here today are Lindsay Butterfield, Director of Urban Growth and Open Space, Bart Jokic, Acting Branch Manager of Real Estate, and I'll ask now Ms. Butterfield to provide a short presentation to committee. Thank you.
Thank you. So as already described, we're here to respond to a motion made by this committee on January 19th, and that is in front of you on screen. Am I driving the slides? No? Okay, next slide, sorry. So that the motion is that administration will assess and explore options for possible purchase of the former St. Andrew School field site and report to committee with an overview of open space priorities for the Inglewood neighborhood and budget implications. So today I'll provide that overview of Inglewood's open space as well as open space priorities. I'll also review purchase options available for the former St. Andrew School field site. And I'll remind the committee that this overview does support the district plan and goals outlined in the city plan and aligns our acquisition priorities with the city's broader goals for social equity. Next slide. So just a little bit of history before we get into it. In July 2015, the St. Andrews School site in Inglewood was declared surplus by the Edmonton Catholic School District, and administration at that time assessed the neighborhood's park space to determine the viability of retaining the school field, which is about half a hectare of open space. The assessment at that time supported acquisition to provide greater equity of parkland between the east and west sides of Inglewood. And in addition, the Muslim Association of Canada was already using the school building to deliver an elementary school program. The acquisition at that time was to allow students to continue using the space and retain existing service levels for park space within the neighborhood. So administration entered negotiation with the Catholic School District. Council approved funding for the 2015 to 18 budget cycle to support that, and discussions with the district commenced, focused on the transfer price, but unfortunately were ultimately hindered by conflicting perspectives on a defined fair market value. So an agreement could not be reached and an administrative decision was made to discontinue negotiation. Next slide, please. So this map that you'll see right shortly illustrates existing publicly accessible open space, and that is in green within the Inglewood neighborhood, as well as within a 400-meter pedestrian buffer zone extending beyond the boundary of the neighborhood. Just for context, the St. Andrew field site is shown in red. Previous assessment work completed in 2015 focused primarily on supply metrics, which supported the acquisition of the site. However, with the introduction of the city plan and BREATHE, the city's green network strategy, administration now considers a more holistic approach. So that includes quantitative but also qualitative considerations. And the considerations provide a comprehensive understanding of the needs and acquisition priorities within neighborhoods and at the district level. In Inglewood, the redevelopment of the former Charles Camsell Hospital grounds have provided an additional 0.37 hectares of municipal reserve, and this is under construction currently, but it will be available next year. And that would not have been considered as part of the previous acquisition decision in 2015. So in assessing this particular site for acquisition, we considered the following this time. So that's the supply, which is the physical amount of open space, as in previous years. But also we look at the diversity, which is the range of different types and functions of open space, the distribution, which is the arrangement of and access to open space, and the quality, which is the function.
So within Inglewood, there are 6 existing parks totaling approximately 15 hectares of open space. And based on the population we have in that neighborhood, it equates to roughly 2 hectares of open space per 1,000 residents, which is the benchmark we typically use for greenfield neighborhoods. So next slide. I want to let the committee know that public engagement was not undertaken for this report. Our default position as administration when we look at properties for open space is acquisition. Since administration is usually bound by acquisition timelines, budget constraints, and competing priorities, community commitment to a particular property can't always be evaluated through engagement as an input. The evaluation of equity undertaken for this parcel aligns with the approach for assessing open space presented to this committee and to council in January 2022, and does include greater consideration of qualitative aspects identified through BREATHE to assist with informing open space decision making. So again, those considerations include undertaking analysis to consider how different elements in the green network contribute to wellness, ecology, and celebration. Integrating social equity into network analysis to consider open space goals that extend beyond the traditional parkland adequacy approach that we've had in the past. And we now include diversity, functionality, and quality, as already outlined. We also consider the accessibility to existing open space and assess the overall distribution of open spaces within the neighborhood and within that 400-meter buffer area. Next slide. So in this image, you can see the existing school at the top of the photo. So that's the Muslim Association of Canada's elementary school, and then the existing field space. The southern half of that field, which includes the soccer pitch, so it really is about half of the green space shown on the photo, had been fenced off from use and not available to the school or community. We understand that from most recent site visits that fencing has been removed. Inglewood does have an adequate supply and distribution of open space to meet the current needs of the neighborhood. However, this could change as the city's population grows and additional development occurs within redeveloping areas, including Inglewood. Due to the neighborhood's proximity to identified nodes and corridors, new growth and development is expected in the area, resulting in a density increase over the medium to long term. Acquisition of this property would support community access to parkland, particularly as additional growth is anticipated through infill, as directed by the city plan. And acquisition would also support the existing Muslim Association of Canada's elementary school and allow for reinstatement of a soccer field currently not in use generally. Next slide. So this map illustrates the distinction between open space titled to the city and held with our parkland inventory, and that is reflected through the sites in blue. And then there's also open space that is used publicly titled to the school boards, and those are represented in green. So that amounts to about 4 hectares within the Inglewood neighborhood. For reference, the former St. Andrew's School field site, again, is shown in red. School board land is accessible to the public and covered through the joint use agreement, which facilitates access to school facilities to community groups, after school hours, and the shared use of fields between school and community. School-held lands do influence acquisition priorities and are available to be purchased at market value per the joint use agreement should they be surplused. The current plan in effect, the West Ingle Area Redevelopment Plan, does not identify specific open space acquisitions. Inglewood does meet current standards for open space supply and includes a diversity of publicly accessible open space distributed across the neighborhood. These park sites have seen recent improvements both through neighborhood renewal and community-led park redevelopment initiatives. In addition, the land area of the former St. Andrew Field site is similar in size to the property that is under acquisition right now through the development of the Charles Camsell Hospital site. These 2 sites are within 1 block of each other and would support similar function consistent with Pocket Park development. Acquisition of the former of the former field site may limit the ability to support strategic open space acquisitions in other neighborhoods where the assessed need for open space is higher and where there is existing statutory plan or policy direction to support land acquisition. Neighborhoods where both conditions apply and where acquisitions are prioritized include the downtown, particularly Mackay Avenue, Strathcona in the West Ritchie sub-area, Queen Mary Park and Central McDougall, along the Queen Mary Park North Edge, as well as West Jasper Place. Within Inglewood, administration will pursue opportunities to collect municipal reserves owing, either as land or cash in lieu of land as part of any redevelopment in the future. Next slide, please. The development of an open space network that meets the needs of Edmontonians is crucial to implement the big city moves of greener as we grow and a community of communities. An equitable distribution of investment in quality parks across Edmonton is essential to the successful implementation of the district network approach that is a foundation of the city plan, and the need for thoughtful and targeted investment to increase and improve amenities as Edmonton population grows and neighborhoods intensify is a critical component of the growth management framework. Just remind everyone that council does make the major funding decisions for park development and guides the pace to bring the city's network of open spaces and parks online. Priorities in the forthcoming capital investment outlook will align with the city plan, and administration will apply growth management principles to the priority-based budget process to ensure that development funding supports the goals and objectives of the city plan. Next slide. So administration has not secured funding for the acquisition of the former St. Andrew's School field site, and the site is not currently identified as a priority for acquisition. Administration does not recommend pursuing acquisition of this property. However, there is merit in considering acquisition should council wish to motion for purchase of the land. In that case, next steps would include bringing forward a request for budget adjustment to assign funds from the city's municipal reserve account, or to include this in a different capital profile going forward. And that concludes administration's presentation. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that presentation. And we have speakers, and I'll call up on them to see if they're here. Harpreet Singh was supposed to be in person. Is Harpreet there?
I can see Harpreet on the Meet, but they just haven't unmuted.
Okay, and Daryl Niedermeyer?
Yes.
Daryl's you there? And Christy Wendell?
Yes, I'm here.
Okay, so you'll be paneled, and we'll go to, each will have 5 minutes to make your presentation, and then we'll go to committee members for questions to you. I'll start with Harpreet Singh. Madam Clerk, if...
oh, it looks like they've unmuted.
Okay. Harpreet, go ahead.
We cannot hear you in council chamber. You may want to leave the meet and rejoin. We'll also have someone from our office reach out just in case there are some technical difficulties.
Okay, we'll go to Daryl Niedermeyer first. Then go ahead, Daryl.
Thank you very much, Your Worship and councillors, and thanks for the opportunity to speak to you on this. As a member of the Inglewood community, I want to thank you as an executive committee for your decision on January the 19th to ask administration for an assessment regarding the options of possible purchase for the St. Andrew's School field site. In my mind, and in the mind of many of my neighbors, there are two issues to this question. Does Inglewood have enough green space in the near term as it continues to densify? And should elementary school children be entitled to an outdoor recreation space in which to exercise growing muscles and exposure to physical fitness? The City of Edmonton's Urban Parks Management Plan targets the amount of green space per neighborhood to be 2.0 hectares per 1,000 residents. The administration's report contains a snapshot of the current state of publicly accessible open space within the neighborhood, but it does not consider demographic trends or developments within the neighborhood. I had previously submitted a bit of a report to you for review. I'm not going to go through the numbers in that report here, but The amount of open space is currently 14.59 hectares. Given Inglewood's population as per the 2019 municipal census, that does amount to 1.99 hectares per 1,000 people, in line with the city's guidelines. However, the city census also shows that Inglewood's population is growing at a rate of 8% for every 5-year census period. With infills and densification and new higher density construction, if anything, the population growth in this neighborhood will be increasing. And so by the end of this decade, 2029, I think, will be the last census for the city this decade. The amount of green space in the neighborhood, without any new acquisitions, will decline to 1.71 hectares per 1,000 residents. Even if we purchase the former St. Andrews Playground, the inventory will amount to 1.74 hectares per 1,000 people, or still be 13% below the city's guidelines for green space benchmarks. As you are aware, the Muslim Association of Canada School is also not new to the neighborhood. They had rented the school for a number of years from the Catholic School Board, and more recently transitioned from renters to owners, and more recently have purchased a second surplus school in the adjoining neighborhood of Dovercourt, which they are converting to a junior high school. The Muslim school currently offers a K-6 program and is at full capacity with 316 students. According to Alberta Infrastructure guidelines for the design and standards of school facilities and playgrounds require that playgrounds should be located in areas that are visible from inside the school building. Currently, many programs have to go to pocket parks in the neighborhood because there is not sufficient outdoor space. And sports field facilities should be established to make sure that they comply with sporting standards. For example, an under 13 soccer pitch requires a minimum size of 90 meters by 45 meters, which is not possible without the southern portion of this school playground being reincorporated back as green space. And so given the emerging need for green space in the Inglewood neighborhood as it continues to densify, the need for an elementary school to have proper play areas for their students, and it just seems that purchasing the southern portion of the former St. Andrews School playground as a municipal reserve is an effective way to address these two challenges within the Inglewood community. And so I would ask the executive committee to support the acquisition of this property. Thank you. And I will entertain any questions or comments.
Okay. Thank you so much. We'll next go to Christy Wendell.
Good morning, all. Good morning, Mr. Sohi, as well as council members. Daryl pretty much gave it a good summary. I'm not going to reiterate everything that he said. I'll add to some of it, however. With the new city development, there was originally new bike lanes put in with cement medians to encourage more use by families and neighborhood children and whatnot. Working from home, I see that regularly used by the MAC school students, bouncing basketballs, kids on bikes, everything like that. I have no doubt that this maintaining as a green space would continue to be utilized by the neighborhood and the community, as well as the children in the school. I agree that they need to have a field space to actually play and stretch their limbs, but in addition to it is the safety of those children too. Again, should something go wrong, you need to pull everybody into the school, God forbid. They need to know where those kids are. They don't need to try and house them from a pocket park somewhere else. Previously stated by the city planners was that there is a similar sized area that's being developed by the council. That area, yes, is a similar size. However, this would actually either make or break a school field for those children and the area community. Again, the bike lane that runs along here runs right past that field. And I have no doubt in my mind that it would be utilized in this neighborhood, most definitely, as well with the population increases with the infills and whatnot. I agree with Daryl at some point. It is that balance of green space versus development, and we're going to need this green space going forward for the increased density and population that's happening in the neighborhood. Once green space is gone, it's gone. And there are so many other spaces that are vacant that are in an industrial type manner that have infrastructure already in place that would cost way more to turn back into green spaces. And it would be nice to have those utilized in the neighborhood prior to digging up a perfectly a green space in a community that's vastly going to be needed going forward. Again, once a green space is gone, it's gone. And that's all I have to say, but I am open to any questions as well from council and council members. Again, redevelopment and rezoning requests have been declined 2 years in a row, and I think making this a green space will hopefully maybe get us community members and the council off this rezoning, redevelopment merry-go-round that we've been on for 2 years as well now. So thank you all for your time.
No, thank you so much for joining us. And I'll ask again if Harpreet Singh is online.
I can see that they've unmuted.
Harpreet, are you there?
I believe our office has also reached out, but there is oh, they've left the meeting again. We can let them know that they can join by phone as well if they just use the call-in number.
Oh, there you go. Using companion mode, I don't know what that is. We'll give it one more shot. If not, then we'll move on to the...
We're also going to send them the call-in number as well.
I think we should carry on then. Okay. All right. We'll go to questions to the members of the public. Any questions to the members of the public? Councillor Rutherford, you exempted this, right? Go ahead.
Great. My question is for Mr. Niedermeyer. First of all, thank you to both Ms. Wendell and Mr. Niedermeyer for being here. I know it's a big ask, especially in the day, and it takes a lot. So I just want to start by acknowledging that and thank you, and I know how much this means to you. In the report, Mr. Niedermeyer, it talks about the West Ingle ARP, and I know we've had some experience and knowledge with that in the past, where there's also been exceptions made to development based on city plan, where they've said that kind of the West Ingle ARP is also kind of not really valid. Could you speak to that a bit?
Thank you, Councillor Rutherford. I haven't been a Edmonton resident long enough to know the start of the West Ingle ARP. I think it dates back to the 1950s. Certainly, this particular piece of property we're talking about, the former St. Andrew School and playground, does not even show up on the West Ingle ARP as any sort of a public use area. And I believe part of that is because the land was initially developed to be residential. In fact, the underlying development plan, I think, is still broken into lots for residential development. And the West Angle ARP just seems to have been mended over time, but probably would warrant a significant rewrite or a refresh at some point in time to pick up some of these inaccuracies and anomalies within the lot plan. Certainly in the West ARP, it's not zoned as urban services at all, and yet that is what it's zoned, and that's what it has been for the last 60 to 70 years.
Great. And then my other question is, so since January, we're learning about this new kind of Camsil surplus site that's going to become parkland. What are your thoughts on that, and administration's comments to the fact that it's an easy, it makes the argument for this site less so?
Yeah, I was a little surprised in the administration report a few minutes ago that this park will be developed within a year, because there's currently no work in developing the park space right now. It is an active construction zone for building housing. There are a number of row housing projects going on along the periphery of the package, as well as the actual Camsil Hospital property is now fully enclosed, and there is some development happening inside. But that has been a project now since, I believe, 1996 or so approximately 25 to 30 years. I have no doubt that, and I know that there is a requirement on the developer to include a package of land for park within the property. That entire project, when fully built out, probably sometime later this century, will be about 600 units. And so, if anything, that pocket park will augment the need for green space for those additional 600 residents, but it will not be located across the street from the Muslim Association School. The comments that Ms. Wendell had made about safety in the case of inclement weather, in case of some sort of a violent encounter, and being able to help students and staff find shelter, that can only be done if a playground is attached or adjacent to a school property.
Great, thank you so much. I'm cognizant of my time, and I want to ask Ms. Wendell a question. I really liked your picking up on the bike lanes. And so could you just speak to that for any council members that aren't really familiar with Inglewood, and how this park site is situated perfectly for not just connectivity with Inglewood, but other neighborhoods?
For sure. The bike lane redevelopment ran right from Stony Plain Road all the way up to 118th Avenue. That involved basically, instead of a painted line, actually cementing off a cement median and putting that in place to protectively put in a protected bike lane. Not only do I see bike lanes and used by bikes, but I see rollerbladers, skateboarders, kids on scooters. Like, the amount of traffic that just making that more of a safe zone bike lane has created has just drawn so many people walking their dogs right from Stony Plain Road all the way up to 118th Avenue. And the amount of traffic I see just working from my office now and seeing people out and about and joggers, it's just such an access route straight basically through to that green space. It's you can see it right from that green space. It's a mere 12 steps to get to that green space. So if that green space was maintained as such, even just as a green space, the amount of people utilizing it would be, in no doubt in my mind, almost overwhelming in appreciation. And if we were to say turn it into a spray park, I can't even imagine what the neighborhood kids and communities coming up and back and forth would do with that. It would just be phenomenal to see it utilized for kids' picnics and family outings and such of the like, because it just seems to fit right in with that redevelopment of that bike lane, which was to reduce traffic and increase a sense of community and foot traffic and people and families.
Thank you so much for your answers and
Apologies, Mr. Mayor, for interrupting. I believe Harpreet has joined us via phone.
okay, so we can.
Yes, I'm available. Can you guys hear me?
Yes, we can hear you now, right? And we're
I
okay.
apologize. We had some technical difficulties.
Yeah, just give me 1 second, okay, Harpreet?
Yep.
And we're okay to.
Yes,
Sure.
we're still hearing
Okay.
from speakers.
We can hear from him, right? Okay, that's okay. We don't need any motion or anything. Good. Harpreet, go ahead. You have 5 minutes to make your
sorry.
presentation.
Yeah, sorry, I won't take the full 5 minutes. I appreciate everybody's comments and buying the site. We're obviously looking to either do something with it or participate and work with the city in any capacity to create a win-win situation for the community, the Mac School, and obviously us as developers. I just want to reiterate, we are willing to work with community, city, and others to make this work and create a win-win situation. Obviously, my partner Camille has owned this for quite some time. I've joined hands to find a solution, and again, just reiterating what I said before is we're willing to work at any capacity to solve the problem here and move forward. But we do need to move forward in some capacity as well. And if anybody has any questions, I'm more than willing to discuss and answer any questions I can.
Okay. Thank you, Harpreet. We'll go to questions. I think Councillor Wright was next, right? Councillor Wright?
Hi, yes, thank you very much. I just had a follow-up question for Mr. Niedermeyer. You referenced the ongoing construction at the Charles Capsule Hospital site, and I'm just wondering, with the search for the unmarked graves and that, do you see that maybe as another challenge of developing that site further?
I'm not very involved in that discussion. I know that there has been some ground survey work that has happened on the property last summer, fall. To my understanding, there was nothing anomalous in those surveys or scans that would indicate that there are unmarked graves on the property. But I don't know if the total property has been scanned or not. That would be a question to put towards Mr. Dubb, the owner and developer of that land. He would be in a much better position to answer that question.
Okay, or maybe I can check with admin as well to see if they've uncovered anything there. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Wright. Just have Ms. Niedermeyer. I find your argument quite compelling, actually, about the lack of green space as we grow in mature neighborhoods, because we do have a very ambitious target of infill and accommodating future growth. 50% of the future population needs to be accommodated within the mature neighborhoods. So if you get to that point where you are today, and a significant reduction in the green space per capita.
I'm sorry, I didn't quite make up the question.
Like, I just want to get it. I find your argument quite compelling, because, but that's not just in your neighborhood. That will be a challenge in other neighborhoods as well, and that's the question I will ask to administration. But I didn't think about that in the like, we are thinking about the current situation, how much green space we have based on 2019 census, which is sufficient based on the city policy. Yeah. But your neighborhood is growing at 8% per year, right?
It is, and yeah, the fact that there is a green package of land sitting here that is in private hands right now, but zoned urban services, it seems like an easy win to just say, can we negotiate a price on that and bring that into public municipal reserves and inventory? And while I understand that land costs money, I also understand that densification increases the tax revenue from a neighborhood going into general coffers for the city. I don't know if there's any mechanism in place to say, you know, if the enrollment base in a neighborhood among the residential properties in a neighborhood increases by a certain amount, some of that money needs to be set aside to enhance the infrastructure, particularly green space and some transit infrastructure for that neighborhood to make sure that that neighborhood remains livable.
Yeah. Would there be any other opportunities for green space within the neighborhood as population increases in the future, or this is the only spot that is available at this time?
At this point in time, this is the only green space left in the neighborhood that is not already designated as school or park space.
Okay. No, thank you for that, because that really touches on to the quality of life that we would like to maintain in the mature neighborhoods as population increases. No, thank you so much for that.
Thank you for your question.
Yeah. And I'll go to Councillor Rutherford for questions again. Go ahead, Councillor Rutherford.
Yeah, maybe I'll put this one to Ms. Wendell first, and then see if Mr. Niedermeyer has anything to add. But I want to dig into that Camsell spot a bit more, and just some of the unique history of that. So even if that park is developed, I know there's been desire in the community for there to be some acknowledgement of the history of that site, given, you know, that the redevelopment of the condo complexes won't really have any of that acknowledgement. So do we think that that park space, even if it is there, will function the same way as the current park space that we're discussing today? What are your thoughts? I know we don't have any answers, but just from that community sentiment.
With the community sentiment, the council space for the park space, I mean, for me, I can only guess. But to me, it would make sense for the developer to somehow acknowledge that space. So in which case, I don't see it being a big, nice open field that can accommodate soccer and such. I see it more as a place with, you know, perhaps, you know, statues or monuments built and sitting space to, you know, to put through thoughts and whatnot, a nice city park space. Whereas this parcel here that we're discussing today would actually, could potentially have some sort of acknowledgement put in place for it as well, but in being adjacent to the existing green space that's part of the school would contribute to having a full field for the community, the school, other sports within. It could become part of the West Edmonton Soccer Association circulation for the little Timbits crews to have their field space to play soccer games with and whatnot during the summer, as well as I believe there's even a baseball diamond there. So that would be the difference I would see with the spaces, is one would be more of a very treed in, growth in, memorial type park space for sitting, whereas this one may be more of an active facility for that, as Daryl mentioned, stretching of legs and, you know, creating healthy lungs and running, and more of a, you know, fly kites, play with frisbees type environment.
Mr. Niedermeyer, do you have anything to add?
As a member of the Inglewood Community League, a couple of years ago, Mr. Dubb had made a presentation to the league about his plans for the property, and mentioned that that park would be more of a memorial park, more of a contemplative landscape sort of environment, rather than a pure playground field. And that's about all I can speak to that. I don't know if those plans have changed or not since then.
Yeah, and obviously engagement with the Indigenous community as well. But I think that the idea that they're like for like is what I'm trying to get at. And would you kind of say that you do not see them as like for like?
I don't see them as like for like.
Okay, thank you so much. That's all my questions. I know I'm out of time, but I just want to again really stress how I know that this is hard sometimes to attend, and the fact that you've both made time to be here. I know I've heard a lot from other community members that couldn't be here today, and they appreciate, I'm sure as well as I do, your ability to be here. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Yeah, again, once again, thank you so much for making time to be part of this conversation. We really, really appreciate that. Okay. And so that concludes the questions to the public, and we'll go to administration next. Councillor Rutherford? Yes. Go ahead. You want to move your motion first, because then if we have questions to the motion, then we can ask those questions to admin as well.
I need clarity because in the document, there's kind of some comments about whether it needs to be in private or can be in public.
Okay, well, okay,
So
go ahead
if
with questions then.
So maybe if I could get clarity from City Clerk on that while I ask some questions, and I can put the motion on the floor. If you could just message me.
I can defer to law, but I believe that there's no numbers in the motion, so the motion can be made publicly. But again, I defer to law.
Okay, so I'll just ask a few questions, and then maybe by the end of my 5 minutes, put the motion on the floor once I've got that answer.
Yeah. Mike?
So, thank you. So one of the things I wanted to ask is about the West Ingle ARP that is cited in this document. Because, you know, with city plan, with district planning, is that ARP really valid anymore? Honestly.
Councillor, so I believe we've got somebody on the team, Sean, that perhaps could speak to that. Sean, are you?
Yep,
join the meeting? Great,
I'm here.
thank you.
Yeah, that's a great question. Part of the city planning framework work that has been going on by administration has led to the repeal of a number of older plans. That work also identified plans that require a closer look to see what the policy implications would be of a change or repeal to it. And district planning is the project that is currently doing that work. So as part of our project, we're reviewing every single plan in effect and doing an evaluation of if the policies remain relevant and connected to the objectives of the city plan. So that work is still underway, and one of the deliverables of the district planning project is to provide a response and a list of proposed repeals to council.
But in the meantime, if that park, like we're at a precipice where, like what one of the public speakers said, if the park goes away, the park goes away. Like there's no getting that park back. So what are your thoughts on that and my other question would be, have we not also diverged from the West Ingle ARP on other zonings based on city plan? Because I can tell you one specific site example. So I want to make sure that like we're either consistently following that plan or we're saying that it's not valid because of city plan and district planning.
So, Councillor, I can try to answer that question. There's other guidance beyond the ARP. So the ARP is dated, 1985, I believe is when it was adopted, and has had subsequent amendments. So it is a dated document. That is factually correct. It is on the list to ensure it is in alignment with city plan, and that assessment is done. And there's a number of neighborhood policies that are in the same space of maybe not 100% applicable anymore, but are being reviewed. Doesn't mean all of it is discounted. So there is still some value in using it to guide direction. But probably in terms of open space, we have much more recent and updated standards and processes and documents that can guide us. And that was what was referenced here.
Yeah, but I think there was also some qualitative stuff that wasn't mentioned in that, which I'll get to in my next round of questions. But like, let's just go to the city plan, because I think we need to talk about how Inglewood is unique. Because one thing that's unique about Inglewood is that 124th Street is considered an arterial road, and it cuts through the neighborhood, which is different than most neighborhoods where arterials are surrounding the neighborhood. So you're getting that density, whereas Inglewood has the potential to literally 123rd Street and 124th Street could become all dense, as well as blocks, like almost the entire neighborhood could end up becoming high density based on city plan and that cut through of 124th Street. Because you've got 118th Ave, 124th Street, 111th Ave, and St. Albert Trail, right? And the one cuts through the neighborhood. So is it not prudent to believe that that is going to be a neighborhood that we're going to see exceptionally high growth in comparative to other neighborhoods? And interestingly, most mature neighborhoods have decreased in population, not increased in census data, but Inglewood is increasing. So could you speak to that a little bit?
I can speak to that, Councillor. I don't have numbers, so I don't, for example, have a list of neighborhoods that are expecting the most increase to 1.25 million or 1.5 or beyond in front of me today. However, what you're saying is correct. There are a number of arterials. This is a neighborhood surrounded by nodes and corridors as identified in the city plan, and we do expect an increase in population. With that, we also know that this neighborhood was not a neighborhood where municipal reserve was taken in the way it is today, and so there's a lot of opportunity to look at sites that are redeveloping, particularly larger scale sites that may redevelop in the future. And I'm not presupposing that that will happen at any particular point in time, but there is an opportunity to take land for parks, as well as to take cash in lieu to increase the quality of the parks that are there. And as mentioned in the report, there are 2 school sites that we would consider a highest priority for acquisition in the future, long term.
But that doesn't add to park space. That doesn't add to that hectare ratio.
That's correct.
I'm going to have to come back for a few rounds, but I will put my motion on the floor at the next round once I get clarity.
Thank you, Councillor Rutherford. Councillor Stevenson?
Sorry, I apologize if I just misheard, but the future acquisition of park space, again, through those redevelopment opportunities, sorry to hear that wouldn't add to the... Yeah, sorry, can you explain that?
Can you repeat that? I'm sorry, Councillor.
Just clarification on the last response, that new park space that would be received through redevelopment, so through dedication, that would add to the amount of park space in Inglewood, correct?
Correct.
Okay, sorry.
Because reserves were not taken at the original subdivision.
Okay,
Correct.
so any further subdivision, there will be that MR dedication.
There's an opportunity, yes.
Yeah, okay. So that does have the opportunity as the area redevelops, as it densifies, that there's that mechanism built in that provides a pool. So I think very much understand where Councillor Rutherford is coming from. And I think for me, it's just knowing other neighborhoods that do have a much lower provision of park space and wanting to prioritize those areas. So I did hear in the report, or something that I thought was worth picking up on as well, is that not only is this green space sort of prioritized across different neighborhoods, within the neighborhood itself, it may also not be where we want to commit funding. So for example, if one of the schools close, again, we may wish to prioritize purchasing those other sites in the future. Was I understanding that correctly?
That's correct. Those would be priority sites.
And I understand as well that the Max school there does have some existing green space that students are able to access, and that's part of their titled lot. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. I guess just another question, just why was the acquisition initially supported? So it did mention that there were some negotiations happening with the school board. Just wondering at that time why that was seen as a purchase we wanted to pursue?
So my understanding of what took place at that time is that sites such as the schools were not included in the network analysis. Any sites that were outside of the neighborhood were not included. The Charles Camsell site was not under redevelopment, and there were no agreements with the city at that point in time. And so there's and as well as just a different approach being taken to how we evaluate sites. So the opportunity arose, and the decision at that time by the people who were in positions to make the decision decided that it was worth pursuing.
Okay, thanks. That helps clarify. So it was not only a different approach, a different analysis, but also some material differences in terms of what's happening with the council site and that park space as well. Okay. Well, I think that answers my questions, and these are always really difficult decisions to be making. I'm speaking to a little bit now, so I guess I can wait on that. There you go.
Yeah.
Thank you. I'll yield my time.
Yeah. So before I go to Councillor Rutherford, I do have some questions that might be appropriately asked in private around the initial sale and So I haven't seen the motion. I understand there's no money attached to it, but I would like to have a better understanding on some of those legal, at that time, negotiations, right? So can we go into private to ask those questions? Can we?
Mayor, it's Jamie Johnson here. Yeah, if you
Jamie?
want to do a motion on private. And have a
Can you
discussion-
speak up? You're breaking out a bit.
Sorry, let me see. It's better. Yes, if you want to do a motion to go in private to discuss some of the particulars of past deals or potential for future deals or the implications of it, that would be totally appropriate.
Okay.
And then come back and do the motion.
Okay. Is that okay, Councillor Rutherford?
Just cognizant of the residents' times that are been here, I wonder if I could maybe put
Yeah, you
the
can put the motion on the floor, then
and
we
I
can
can
go
have my
into
turn,
private.
and then we can go into private?
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
Okay. So it's now my turn here.
Yeah, go ahead.
So just to again confirm with legal, I'm okay to put this on the floor?
Yes, because it doesn't include the dollar amounts. It does need the financial ask at the bottom of it if you're planning to put the whole motion on.
Yep. Okay, so I'd like to put the motion on the floor that administration approach the property owner to negotiate the purchase of the former St. Andrew's School field site at fair market value as outlined in the April 27th, 2022 Executive Committee UPE 1042 report with acquisition funding through a city's municipal reserve account. If necessary, administration prepare a budget adjustment for council consideration to transfer municipal reserves fund into the existing matured area land acquisition capital profile to support this acquisition.
Okay.
And can I speak to it?
Yeah, you can introduce it, yeah.
Yeah. So I get it. It's hard when we're, here and we're looking at this from a whole city lens, and this is something that is very hyper-local. But this is something that has, like has been mentioned, is I think a bit of a unique context for this neighborhood, not only in terms of how it will grow, but how it is currently growing. But there's also quality factors that I think are not being taken into consideration. Like when you look at that map from administration, they have big blocks of green space, but those are actually kind of misleading because 1/3 of those bigger blocks of green space are school sites. They're actual school buildings. They're not green space. So I don't know how that was measured in, but I think for the nominal cost that this would be in the grand scheme of things, when we talk about, we just had a report on, a special dividend that we're going to receive, when we see these things that are so meaningful for this community. Inglewood has been embracing densification with open arms. They were supposed to have a pocket park on 124th Street as part of the 124th Street renewal, but instead that got turned into permanent supportive housing. Right? So this is a community that is accepting and embracing all kinds of densification and changes, which is very unique. So the fact that they're here standing up saying, hey, we really need this park space, and the report does talk about the disparity between the west and east side of Inglewood, and I really would contend that, yes, if, Edmonton Public Schools makes one of those sites surplus, we would prioritize purchasing it, but it does not add to the total park space within this neighborhood. Nor are the other park spaces really that high quality when you look at that map. So I get that they're talking about Prince Charles, but that's actually a very industrial area, so I'm not sure, I wouldn't even consider that a park or a space that I've used. I know it's a hard sell to my colleagues. I know what I'm up against here, but I felt it was imperative for me to put this motion on the floor for my residents of my ward that I've heard from many times, but also just in understanding that this, for this community, is minimal for us, but big for them. And so I urge my colleagues to please consider that as we discuss this motion.
Thank you, Councillor Rutherford. Can you move that we go into private?
I'll move that we go into private.
Any questions to go into private? Please vote.
We have 4 votes.
Display the votes, please. Thank you.
The door should be open in just a moment. We're good to go.
Good to go. Okay, questions to administration? Councillor Rutherford?
Yeah, so I do have another question, and it's just a bit of assurance as well, because when Inglewood renewal was happening, a few community members mentioned to me that there was some shadow maps of the park space in the Westmount area, the Westmount Junior High area, that kind of looked like it was going to be subdivided. So I want to just get a surety that there is no plan with administration to subdivide any of the park space near Westmount Junior High.
We are not aware of any plan.
Is anyone else to comment on that or not? Okay, you're not aware of.
Would that be a different department? I just want to make sure that, we don't say we're not aware, but then we find out after this that there is actually a plan. I'm looking for that assurance.
I would have to connect with various other departments to confirm that there is no plan for some other reason to make a subdivision. I don't know.
Okay.
Okay, no, that's fair. Maybe if there could be a memo on that, that would be greatly appreciated. So I don't know if you need a motion for a memo or not, but
Yep. No.
yeah, so that would be fantastic. So my last questioning is about this sort of qualitative versus quantitative decision making. And I know that you said that there was not in the report it says that there was not a full GBA plus analysis that was done specific to this report. I guess I want to know from administration, what do you think are some qualitative factors with this specific neighborhood that should be considered within this discussion?
Sure. So the key qualitative factors come from Breathe. So we do look at sites that are appropriate for celebration, for wellness, and for ecology. And we look at how those uses are distributed throughout the neighborhood. I'll have my colleague Corey Churchill speak a little bit more to that, but that is typically the approach that we're taking. And I will say that the full GBA plus analysis, the reason for not doing that is just frankly the timeline available. And as stated in the presentation, we do take a default position that if there is an open space available, that the community will want to retain that. And so that is our default position in terms of how we generally understand the public will react to the opportunity. So we do take that. I'll turn it to Corey for maybe a little more detail on how Breathe is looked at.
Thanks, Lindsay. Yeah, just to add to that, I think some of the things that we look at in terms of diversity, functionality, and quality. So within Inglewood, we're looking at the available park spaces, be it pocket parks, the school community parks, the linear green park along the east edge, and the amenities within those that are currently provided, and then identifying potential gaps where there might not be amenities offered. So, for example, the Community League has an existing play space, future spray park planned, off-leash area within the east edge along the linear park, and then active sport fields sort of peppered throughout the school park sites on the west side. So those are some of the qualitative considerations that we looked at as well.
Do we consider items like, from an equity lens, qualitative factors like income, ability, identity, any other kind of identity factors in terms of a composition of a community in determining anything on this park space?
These are things that we're looking at, and I would say in conjunction with IIS, who's leading a review of the neighborhood park development plan or program. And so those are things that we want to be able to address more effectively than we are currently. So that is work that is underway and that we hope will result in a change in our approach even further within the next few years.
Okay, and then my last question, in the report it says that there's currently 6 parks, but it's actually only 5, correct? Because you're counting the CAMSA one, which isn't a park right now.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Knack.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a few questions for with the motion. So the motion identifies a funding source as the municipal reserves account, and I just want to double check: is that different then, or the same as the parkland purchase reserve identified in the report?
So I can answer that. After further consideration and consultation specific to this site, we would be looking at the mature area acquisition profile as the correct funding source for this. Yeah, so that would be the source of funding at this point in time.
The mature, yes, and that one we approved funding in the 2019 to 2022 budget, correct?
That's correct, yes.
So that is the same fund as the one that would typically be used for some of the communities identified in the report earlier, so the downtown Strathcona, Queen Mary Park, and West Jasper Place?
That's correct, yes.
Okay. We haven't done a lot of acquisitions yet. There's been a report on that. Part of it involves a bit of maybe a strategic change. I think we've been looking in the past for like one giant park in each of these spots, and we have since reformatted that approach to look for more pocket parks spread out throughout these areas that have a deficiency. Is that still now the current approach?
Yes, that's correct, Councillor Knack. And in addition to that, we're working with real estate to look for ways to be a little more proactive in those neighborhoods that do have more of a deficit of open space. And that would be a little bit new as well, to be proactive rather than wait for sites to appear.
Okay. What was the approved budget for the mature area land acquisition? I'm trying to remember. I'm drawing a blank though.
I don't have that at my fingertips, but I can look it up.
Okay. Does this motion, the way it's written, necessarily put it above any of the other locations? Because I think the communities identified in the report currently have a greater deficiency of park space right now. So does this prioritize, or does this allow you to go and exercise a conversation, look through that? Ultimately, there might be a final council approval. We'll have an idea of what the overall budget is in that particular profile. So I just want to get a sense of that based off how it's worded.
So, Lindsay, if you don't mind, anytime you make a decision to fund something and direct us to negotiate, you are prioritizing outside of the larger framework if it hadn't been contemplated in the larger framework.
Okay. But this, to be fair, this would have been included back in 2015 to 18. This would have we might have listed this as one of those communities in that list many years ago before the transactions that occurred. Is that correct?
So you may have had a prioritization in the 2015 to 2018 budget, but it didn't necessarily carry through to 2019 to 2022, and it may not, in fact, carry through to 2023 to 2026, because of all the other ancillary things that happen around neighborhoods and budgetary decisions.
Fair. So we might not know what the total amount was approved for this budget cycle. Do we know what's currently in that profile left for all of these areas? Because we didn't expend most of the money from what I understand over this 4-year cycle. So I imagine the amount's quite high.
So we're just checking on that. I'll get you that information.
Okay. Before we get into speaking, I'd like to make sure I have that information, Mr. Mayor, just to get a sense of where we're at. Again, I don't know if there's someone from a planning perspective. I imagine we will likely continue in the next budget cycle with some type of funding profile for mature area land acquisition, both in terms of carryover from what we didn't spend over the last 4 years, plus based off breathe and a number of other factors. We will likely have a need to do more beyond the communities listed in the report. Would that be fair?
Yes, I can speak to that. The mature land acquisition reserve is one that we've identified as one where we, again, need to be a little more proactive and also probably needs a little more funding just because of the land prices in some of the neighborhoods identified as priorities.
I'm out of time. I'll come back to get the answer to that question, Mr. Mayor, whenever the time comes.
Good. Thank you, Councillor Knack. I have some questions around I'm really struggling to understand the allocation in a way for green space that there are neighborhoods that are close to the ravine systems, that are close to the river valley, and they will have abundant access to green space. But communities like Inglewood, others that are not close to those natural spaces, how do we determine that equitable access to green spaces? Do we have a kind of a same formula for every neighborhood based on 2 hectares, or is it different?
So prior to the city plan, yes, there was a standard metric and we looked at the amount of parkland available and it was strictly numerical. We are trying to evolve our approach in advance of what really needs to happen, which is that we need a park network analysis that's done as part of our district plans, so that we can identify the gaps and identify not only in terms of the amount of parkland, but in terms of those qualitative factors as well. And so this is work that will build on and be part of district plans in the future.
Okay,
so in the meantime, we are doing a little bit of an in-between approach where we're trying to incorporate those factors with regard to how much funding we do have available and look at this a little more holistically.
Yeah. No, okay, so that's to happen in the future. Because what I'm trying to understand, I think Councillor Rutherford raised this very good point that we need to think about is that the socioeconomic factors, right, and the ability for people to live close to green spaces based on their income and their ability to afford, right, factoring those into figuring out their quality of life aspect, right? Because people close to the ravine systems and river valley, probably houses are more expensive, right? But they have also access to great amenities as far as green space is concerned, right? So I think I'm just trying to understand: are we hopefully not creating by having less green space where market values come down, and we're creating those mini, I want to use the word, I think, stratification in a way that people who can't afford then are pushed into those areas where green space is less, along with other factors. You know what I'm trying to get at without using some dramatic language to describe that.
Yes, and that's absolutely what we need to get to, and that's work in progress. But we're not at that point yet where we can identify that based on demographic data and based on our existing network. That's work that has to be done, hopefully through the next budget cycle.
Okay. Because in the meantime, if we don't look at these kind of opportunities to preserve some of that green space, and we lose that opportunity, and then 5 years from now, we determine, okay, well, this neighborhood could have used more green space compared to a neighborhood living close to a creek system or a vein system.
Yes, these are all possibilities that we need to keep in mind, and we try to assess that without becoming too hypothetical, perhaps.
Yeah, okay, good. Yeah, because people's ability to pay where they live should not be a way where they have less access to green space, even though you can walk there and bike there, but the day-to-day access for that's what I'm trying to get at. Okay, good. All right, Councillor Knack?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just wondering if we have an answer to that question now around budget.
Just waiting for the answer, Councillor Knack.
Sure. And I guess while we're just double checking on that, I'll ask one other question. Realistically, as we are at the last year and getting close to the last half of this current 4-year budget cycle, I envision, unfortunately, that these areas identified in the report, we won't likely be acquiring land. We won't be expending the entire budget this 4-year cycle regardless. We've only reorganized our strategy as of about a year ago, I think. Is that correct?
That's correct, Councillor. In terms of strategy, the adoption of the city plan was really the instigating event, and we're continuing to work closely with real estate to figure out how we can best support land acquisition in neighborhoods, and with IIS to figure out how we can best support development of parks in neighborhoods as well.
Sure. And I just want to make sure I'm clear. So like the idea, and I know West Shasta Place the best as it's within the ward I serve in. So, you know, in the past we were looking at, again, multiple lots to create one giant park. Now the new strategy would be, we are okay with buying a single lot and doing a pocket park to help fill in the gaps in a neighborhood like that, which are currently at one of the greatest levels of deficiency, I think, in the city.
That's one example of an approach that we might use, correct, yes.
Okay, great. Fantastic. Do we have an answer to the overall question?
Okay, this answer is slightly complex.
Sure.
So at the time that you approved the capital profile, there was $3.9 million in there. Of that capital profile, you have only $440,000 remaining uncommitted, but you have more than that is unspent. And so this is the tricky part of the motion. You don't actually have enough uncommitted funding in that profile without drawing funding from another reserve, which is why we think this has to be a budget adjustment. Or you have to change what you have previously committed to make funding available for this.
Okay. So, so if this goes to council and is then approved, that would trigger the requirement to come forward with some type of budget adjustment. We're not talking numbers right now, but there would be a budget adjustment to make up that difference. Or does this motion have to be restated with that in mind, just to make it clear up front?
I think we could get you the budget adjustment by the time this goes up to council.
Oh, perfect. Okay, great. So that's clear then for me. Wonderful, Mr. Mayor. I am done my questions. I'll speak to it at the appropriate time. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much. All right, so that concludes the questions to administration. And we do have a motion on the floor. Sorry, Councillor Paquette. You have questions to administration, Councillor Paquette?
No, just to speak, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, and Councillor Rutherford, you have questions?
Sorry, the motion on the floor does not match. At this point, what I'm seeing on the screen does not match. So it's a point of order, I guess. What I feel like I read out.
Are you looking for the if necessary portion?
Yeah.
We can add that if you'd like.
Yeah, so I had in my original readout, if necessary, administration prepare a budget adjustment for council consideration to transfer municipal reserve funds to the existing mature area land acquisition capital profile. So that's the piece I think Councillor Knack is getting at, and I actually had it, so yeah, I think that this motion isn't fully complete, so if that could be added. And
get that on the
so
screen.
instead of, yeah, but I think that number 1 can be cut then too, right? To Fairmont, as outlined in the report, and then period, and then the second point being if necessary. So I think that this could be struck out too with acquisition funding through the city, because that's not what I had put forward as a motion.
I'll just look to administration. I believe what we have on the screen does match what's in the document,
I'm looking at the Google Doc right now.
just without the if necessary portion, but just to confirm, because I'm unsure if the remainder of that sentence changes the intent of the motion.
So I think you need the if necessary part for us to be able to bring back the budget adjustment for council.
Okay, so let's just keep that in there and then add
Where
that.
would that go, Councillor?
It's supposed to go after reserve accounts, so after point 1.
If necessary?
It should say, if necessary, administration prepare a budget adjustment for council consideration to transfer municipal reserve funds into the existing mature land acquisition capital profile. And I think this if necessary is important because what Councillor Knack is alluding to is that based on this amount, there may or may not be. So it may be a budget adjustment of, let's say, 500,000, or it may not be, depending on what other happens with all these other properties within 2022.
So can you read that again, so city clerk have that?
I think they do have it, they just.
Do you have that language?
Yeah, we're just going to get it on the screen there.
Okay, got it. Okay. In the meantime, we can go to speak to this. Councillor Paquette.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you to Councillor Rutherford for bringing this forward. If I were voting on this, I would not be supportive of this motion today as it stands, but not because I'm not supportive of parks or green space or any of those things. There are a few things I'm worried about. I'll just express some caution, and this obviously is not the only decision point, so that's something to consider as well. But I am a little bit worried about setting a precedent for, basically the owner of the land outbid the city of Edmonton, decided that the land was not developable for the profit that they would like. And so now they're selling it back to the city of Edmonton. And so it's not really a great model that we want to follow going forward. And if this sets a precedent, that would be concerning. The other caution I would have is that we really work hard to create prioritized budgets and to have these debates and conversations during budget times. And if we are not following that model, that really, and if we're not having this conversation in context of larger conversations regarding the city plan or the overall needs of every community, we sort of lose the thread, and we risk running a perception of unfairness, because there are a lot of communities that would love $800,000 to do something for their area. And this potential sale or purchase actually does represent something, I think, a little bit unique. But every community could make the argument that their needs are unique as well, and that their opportunities to use money like that for the benefit of their communities is unique. So I am sympathetic, but I also am concerned about the idea of going forward with this without aligning with policy, so things can be perceived as being piecemeal decisions, while we are actually trying to look at more of an overarching policy and way forward that does appear fair to every community and does make sense in context of the budget and has had that rigorous scrutiny that budget time provides in order to assure not only council and administration
but also the public, that things are being done in a fair and prioritized fashion. So those would just be my cautions. And that's it. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Paquette. Councillor Knack.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. A few thoughts. So I will be supporting this motion, and I'll provide a bit of commentary as to why. First, and appreciate our previous speaker's comments, I'm not really worried about precedent on this, this creating a precedent, because this is a very unique situation. There's history as to why this site wasn't originally purchased by the city, and I think it was a bit messy in the first place and probably should have been addressed at a different time. But I don't really think there's other communities that have quite the same history with a parcel of land like this. So that's one thing that I can put to rest. I do share the concern about this potentially bumping other communities or that prioritization piece. But what I've heard and with how the motion is worded, this isn't going to be done at the expense of the other communities listed in the report. And that's really important because to your point earlier, Mayor Sohi, there's at least one or two or maybe even three communities in that list that are in a situation where maybe property values are quite a bit lower, and to your concern you raised around that equity argument, that I would be concerned if we were taking away funding from areas that have right now a greater deficiency in park space to then use for a spot that is currently meeting its target. But I appreciate the point that over time it may then dip below that mark. So since it's not taking away from any of those neighborhoods with the way this motion is worded, that again provides me with some comfort on this. And I don't think, because of that history, that this is potentially having this jump the queue in any meaningful way that over any other community outside of the ones listed in the report. So I don't have that fear or concern arise right now. I think it's also worth noting that even if we approve this, there's no guarantee the land will be purchased by the city. That it says the city will go and engage the landowner. The landowner may not want to sell the property at fair market value. That is well within their right. So accepting this doesn't mean that actually is a lock by any stretch, but I think it's worth proceeding with. And the main reason I feel good about supporting this is that notion that, you know, and going through Inglewood, I have family not right in Inglewood, but just to the west there. And I know that this is an area that will have a lot of development pressures going forward. And so I expect we'll see a lot of future applications for new development, much higher density. With the city plan, the way it's designed, this community has not just the corridor that was mentioned by Councillor Rutherford, it has many nodes that will then be, I think, subject to substantially higher density. So I think this is one of those situations that because I see a lot of redevelopment, including around this site going forward, it makes sense to acquire some of this land, or at least attempt to acquire some of this land to further help our efforts in substantially greater densification within our mature neighborhoods, which is what will come to this neighborhood and many others throughout the city. So very much appreciate the conversation around this. While I understand some of the hesitation, I feel quite comfortable supporting this. To Councillor Rutherford's earliest point, I don't actually think this is a test cell. I think there will need to be this type of investment in green space in a number of mature communities as we work to substantially increase our density within our mature neighborhoods to, at a minimum, at least match what we do in most new neighborhoods right now, but really design them in a way that allows for these more complete 15-minute communities. So I'll be supporting this. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Knack. Councillor Stevenson.
Yes, thanks very much. And I appreciate the conversation this morning and appreciate the spirit of this. It's a very reasonable proposition to invest in our public spaces always. Public spaces are a huge part of what make our communities livable and increase the quality of our life. I will not be supporting this motion, however, as I feel that the neighborhood is currently well served by existing open space, and there are opportunities. You know, for me, a big piece there is knowing that there maybe future subdivisions which provide that opportunity for municipal reserve allocation. So there's a mechanism built into this neighborhood that would enable future park space to be provided if and when the population density does increase. I would also say that, you know, having park space is one thing, and that's certainly very important in terms of the quantity, but also thinking about the quality of the park space as well. And I think one of the most important qualities of park space is that they're well used and that they're active. And part of supporting that is having population, is having people in the neighborhood who use those spaces. In that way, I feel that the use of this site for development to provide new homes and options for people living in what is a wonderful area of the city is the greater imperative. So I will not be supporting, but very supportive of the efforts of Councillor Rutherford for moving this forward.
Thank you, Councillor Stevenson. Before I go to Councillor Rutherford,
should I move that we extend orders just to complete the agenda?
Sure, yes, let's include or move the, Councillor Knack, move the, we finish this item?
The whole agenda, because this is the last item, so.
Yeah, this is the last item. Good. Please vote.
We have 4 votes.
Display the votes, please. That is carried. And I'll come back here. So you know, Edmonton is truly a blessed city when it comes to access to green space, because we have a wonderful river valley. We have a ravine system that provides that amenity, but that is not equally distributed to all Edmontonians, and that is something that I think we need to keep in mind as we welcome more and more people to live in our city, that we provide that equitable access to green space regardless of where people live. Another thing I kind of noticing is that because of access to the green space, you know, people's affordability to live where they want to live is, I think, being impacted in a way that neighborhoods that are very close to those rich amenities are sometimes not affordable for all Edmontonians to live in. So how do we make sure that people living in other areas have access to green space? And so this is one unique situation. I mean, not unique in any way. There are other neighborhoods that are facing this situation, but unique opportunity is this, and this presents a unique opportunity that if we lose this space, then that space may not become available. And I agree with Councillor Knack. This should not be seen as taking money away from other neighborhoods to purchase this land. I think we should be actually looking at what more we need to do to enhance green spaces in the neighborhoods that are by their location are not close to the creek system, a ravine system, and the river valley. So for me, it's more of an equity point, and making sure that everyone is able to enjoy abundance of green spaces. So I'm going to support this for that reason. Look forward to our budget deliberations on other neighborhoods. Because as we encourage more density, as we encourage more people to live into and move into these neighborhoods, we need to make sure that the quality of life is provided, and that we enhance that quality of life. So I think, with that reason, I'm going to support this motion. And I'll go to Councillor Rutherford.
Great. Thank you, and thank you to all my colleagues for your questions and the rich debate on this item. You know, I want to start by first, for those that aren't familiar with Inglewood as a community, it's a south central neighborhood within Warden-Olnick. It's actually the most southern neighborhood next to Woodcroft, and I'd like to highlight that Woodcroft also is losing a bunch of park space with the Coronation Rec Center, so they've also given up a lot of park space recently for that development as well. But it stretches from 118th Avenue to 111th Avenue, It has 124th Street, which is going to become a vibrant street as it goes through renewal, but is also considered an arterial. There's a lot of really cool things about Inglewood that I think are really important to highlight in the context of this. It's one of the most densely populated neighborhoods outside of the urban core. It has one of the highest renter ratios of any neighborhood in Edmonton. It has the highest income gap spread of any neighborhood, which means it has people with high incomes and people with very low incomes all living together in the same neighborhood, which I think is phenomenal, and I wish that that was a model for more of our neighborhoods, quite frankly. It also has it has the highest urban Indigenous population through, the committee discussion we had on Monday that Big Stone Cree Nation mentioned that in their comments, why they've put the Big Stone Cree Nation medical center there. And it also has the historical significance of the Camsell Hospital right within the heart of it as well. But I think what we're talking about today is about timing. And what I hear resonating is the comment from one of the speakers today in that once the park space is lost, it's lost. And I think it's great that we're doing this work, and I'm so excited to see the work that we do around GBA Plus and green space and how that comes forward. But if we make this decision today to not move forward with this, that park space will indeed be lost, and we can't get it back. And I understand the concerns from my colleagues around the precedent it sets, but I agree with my council colleague, Councillor Knack. I don't think that this sets a precedent. I think this is a very unique, even as it said, it was messy in terms of how the decision to walk away from the deal. There's a lot of history here. And so I think that this is unique enough in that case that I don't believe it is a precedent setting. I do understand about, budget prioritization, and I wish I had been a seasoned councillor that had the foresight, a month into my term in December to bring this motion forward as part of the budget debate, as part of the fall budget adjustment. But quite frankly, I was learning the ropes at that time, and I didn't. But I will next time. So I really do appreciate that, and I recognize that. So I hope that my colleagues understand that, it's not ideal timing, but also we're all learning, and so let's give each other some grace on that as well. I really think that this has potential to set the stage for what we're talking about, is those pocket parks. All of the park spaces that we currently have in Inglewood, in that neighborhood, are actively used. You can't go to any single park at any given time and not see people playing and using those spaces. And I think as it densifies further, I resonate with what it said in the report about how the park space is currently serving the current population. But I'm going to take my colleague, Councillor Ann Stevenson's own words and say we can't be just thinking about what's building for today. We have to be thinking about the people that aren't born yet, the people that don't live there yet. And this is a great example of this at play. And so I really encourage my executive colleagues today to support this motion. And if and when it comes to council, if it does require budget adjustment, I would encourage all my colleagues listening to also consider supporting it as well, because like I said, this is a nominal amount in our overall budget for something that the community is saying is a big importance for them. And they've accepted bike lanes, they've accepted permanent supportive housing, they've accepted density, not just on the peripheries of their neighborhood, but in their neighborhood. And I think that this all speaks to the fact that them coming here and asking for this less than a half hectare of land to be preserved is significant. So please do consider that now and if it comes to council.
Thank you, Councillor Rutherford. Please vote.
We have 4 votes.
Display the votes, please. That is carried. Okay, so that was it. Notices of motions or motions without customary notice? Seeing none, we are adjourned.